Welcome back to the program, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new, please make sure that you are subscribed to World Affairs in Context on Substack or Patreon for more and exclusive content. I would absolutely love to see you there. Just follow the links in the video description below to get connected. Let's talk about Cuba, because what's unfolding right now in Havana is not just an energy crisis. It is a geopolitical stress test amid an unfolding humanitarian crisis, humanitarian catastrophe, where even Cuba's ICUs, intensive care units, might be unable to continue operations if Cuba runs out of energy resources. Forecasts about Cuba's remaining fuel reserves vary dramatically across the board. Some analysts say the island has 15 days left, and others say maybe 2 to 3 months, if strict rationing is imposed. But even the most optimistic estimates describe a country that is operating literally on fumes. And this did not happen in a vacuum. The situation deteriorated sharply after President Donald Trump's January 29th executive order. If you're not familiar with it, I wrote an entire article on my Substack and Patreon with the details. Please check it out next. It's a short one and it is free. So Trump's order introduced an additional ad valorem duty on goods imported into the United States if they come from a country that directly or indirectly supplies oil to Cuba. And by oil in this context, we are referring to petroleum products in general, not just crude oil. And so that dramatically raises the cost of doing business with Havana for any country that trades with the United States of America. So again, the United States is using energy as a weapon, is using its economic leverage as a weapon against an impoverished country. So the immediate consequence, of course, is quite brutal. For example, Mexico, which had stepped in after Venezuela reduced its role as Cuba's primary supplier, withdrew. On February the 9th, Mexico effectively exited the equation, and its economic relationship with the United States outweighed any strategic incentive to continue supplying Cuba. That's exactly what Washington was hoping to accomplish, and it succeeded. Russia is now stepping in to help address the unfolding humanitarian catastrophe that is a direct result, and I will repeat that once again, this is a direct result of Washington's policies. According to recent reporting, the last major shipment of Russia's oil to Cuba took place in February of 2025, so this has been over a year, and at that point Russia shipped 100,000 tons, and it was delivered under a $60 million state loan. That sounded substantial, but here's the reality. Cuba's annual requirement is roughly 100,000 tons. In other words, a shipment of that size covers only a short window. Estimates suggest that the latest presumed delivery would last just under 20 days. So that is not energy security, as you're well aware. This is just life support. And the island is literally squeezed. And the squeeze is not theoretical, it is visible. Gas stations are running dry. When fuel is available, it's often sold in dollars, and the price per gallon has reportedly exceeded twice the minimum monthly wage. Just think about that. Imagine that. A single fill-up costing more than what many people earn in a month. Power outages are spreading across Cuba. Water systems are faltering because pumps depend on electricity. A second wave of hotel closures has reportedly begun, and tourism is supposed to be Cuba's economic lifeline. So this is going to strangle its economy even more. Authorities are now urging citizens to conserve everything: water, food, electricity, and even the charged mobile phone is becoming a strategic asset in Cuba. That is the level of scarcity that we're talking about here. Now, here's where this becomes bigger than just Cuba. Russia has military technical cooperation agreements with Havana. It has repeatedly expressed readiness to provide assistance to Cuba, and according to diplomatic sources, Russia is preparing to send oil and petroleum products as humanitarian aid to Cuba. But humanitarian aid is a short-term patch. Even if Russia does deliver fuel, which it's poised to do that, it buys weeks or months at best, and there is a cost to that too. Supplying Cuba under current U.S. policy risks economic and political repercussions for Moscow and its broader relationships with Washington. So Latin American countries on the other side are sort of on the fence. They're just watching carefully what happens. Many are very reluctant to step in because they fear secondary tariffs or economic penalties from the United States. So at the end of the day, Cuba is isolated and its people are suffering as the result of Washington's policies. They're vulnerable, they're dependent, and the pressure could escalate further. That's the bad news. So far, there has been no full naval or air blockade, but the conversation is already shifting toward that possibility. And if such a blockade were implemented, it would dramatically raise the stakes. And that leads to the central geopolitical question. If the United States intensifies pressure on Cuba, which some sources appear to suggest, how will Russia respond? And what about China? In the executive order, Russia and China were described as hostile countries and, quote, dangerous adversaries. Again, I discussed that in great detail over on my Substack or Patreon. You're welcome to read more about that. I will not go into the details of the actual executive order. So that language matters. It frames the situation not as a regional dispute between the United States and Cuba, but as a part of a broader strategic rivalry. Cuba, in this sense, becomes symbolic. If Moscow and Beijing claim to support a multipolar world, a world that is not dominated by a single power, then Cuba is a test case. If they allow a close partner in the Western Hemisphere to collapse under American economic pressure, then critics will argue that multipolarity doesn't really mean anything. It's just rhetoric without enforcement, without any actionable policy. And so, on the other hand, if China and Russia decide to escalate their engagement, whether economically or diplomatically, or which is very unlikely militarily, the confrontation deepens. So this is why the Cuban energy crisis is not just about oil shipments. It's about deterrence, it's about alliances, credibility, and the emerging multipolar world. Can Russia afford to let Cuba fail? Can China afford to let Cuba fail? Can they afford not to? How much economic strain is Moscow willing to absorb? And how far is Washington prepared to go to enforce its policy? Those are the big questions to answer. Meanwhile, inside Cuba, ordinary citizens are standing in fuel lines, hotels are closing, and power grids are barely operating. This is what geopolitical competition looks like at ground level. It's not abstract. It's lights going out, it's water pressure dropping, and ordinary people literally suffering as they're unable to get medical treatment, as they're unable to get access to basic needs. The next few months will be critical. If fuel reserves truly fall to, let's say, 15 days at any point in time, the crisis becomes acute. And what's clear is that Cuba cannot survive long without external support. It is far too vulnerable. The island's structural vulnerability is exposed, and energy, once again, proves to be the pressure point of global politics that Washington loves to use. Thanks so much for watching this quick episode. If you enjoy my work and my content, make sure that you support me on Substack, Patreon, and YouTube. Thank you so much to every single one of you who has become a paid subscriber. I appreciate you so much. I look forward to seeing you here tomorrow. Take care.